Good evening, everyone, and tech time travelers. Reid here, signing in from Johannesburg. I'm sitting actually approximately 9,000 miles away from UK, where one of our special guests is sitting uh, for this particular show. Uh, Today is a bit different and special show. We're going to talk about uh, quite high-tech stuff. Uh, Usually these days we hear about cloud and edge computing and emerging technologies. So today's session is particularly about edge computing, what's happening in the market and the industry. Uh, Without further ado, I would like our special guest to introduce himself on Bourne Space Station. Over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, Rizwan. Chris Reid from Another Peak. Another Peak is an organisation headquartered in Grenoble in the south of France and comprising a set of innovation experts who are based around Europe and the US. To be competitive and I guess relevant in the current climate, organisations of all shapes and sizes must embrace the digital revolution like never before. For many years, that embrace has been a siloed affair. I've seen it personally. It's something at arm's length, usually focused around IT departments and cloaked in relationships with selected partners and hence limited scope. And so there's the old saying, you don't know what you don't know. But that is all changing. And I think, Rizwan, the impact of COVID-19 can't be underestimated. Be it cloud, robotics, compliance, or IoT. Innovation has to be corporate wide. It has to sit at the board level, commanding not just an expansive view of emerging ideas, but internal innovation culture to allow those ideas to grow. It's about structure and communications just as much as it is technology. So what I'd like to do is spend some time looking at the business challenges and then some of the technology that sits behind that.
Thank you, Chris. Chris is talking from his home office. Well, I call it the camp office. So since it's a bit technical session, and today the guest is hardcore engineer, so I need to be careful. I've written down my questions, and I'm gonna use my papers to read the precise questions, so I don't do any mistakes, and let Chris ask me some technical questions, which I won't be able to answer. So he's going to talk about some innovation. With so many people working from home, companies are searching for new ideas around innovation and emerging tech. These are the key areas. Chris, people talk about cloud, IoT, and more recently, edge computing, which I know you have done a huge amount of work with. But what does that mean in actual business terms?
Okay.
Over to you.
Good question, Rizwan. Good question. So what I tried to do is in these slides is just put together some of the questions that companies should be asking, to answer those kind of questions, Rizwan. How do we learn about innovation and evaluate it against the existing business drivers? So one example that we worked on, take a team that specializes in site inspection services. Would they ever consider looking at quadrupedal unmanned ground vehicles or cheap programmable robot dogs to most people? But they wouldn't. But these dogs, have high definition imaging. They have radar. They have chemical sensors. And then you start to say, well, would the technology that surrounds these robotic dogs put these people off? And I think what we've learned at Another Peak is that we have to present technology as themes. It doesn't matter whether it's cloud or IoT. It's got to be a combination of ideas. New business opportunities wrapped in this comfort blanket of the install base. It's about getting folks comfortable, but also creative. So, you've then got to say, okay, does all this new tech offer new business opportunities and potentially take my business in a different direction? So, if the site security company had an IT department used to handling and analyzing data, we then ask, what additional services could the information flowing from the dog actually generate? And so an example at the airports was, putting a medical triage package on the robotic dog and potentially making them the first responder to a major site incident. So we start to cultivate the concept of themes. And I think the next thing is, can the business ingest these new concepts and can it communicate those internally? And I think what we've learned is that there is a real need when you're talking innovation to establish a communications culture as an overlay. Yes, we can expose new emerging tech. We can translate the words and show how it would integrate into your business, evolve your business. But in order for that successful, you need an internal innovations culture, really, Rizwan. So, if you think about it in technical terms, it's like DevOps or continuous improvement. These concepts have been in place across business, but we've got to remove the fear factor, and everybody has to be part of the innovation. So one of the things we've done at Another Peak, whilst we as a group do the technical stuff, and we have partners now able to construct management frameworks for change, and we've also got people who specialize in internal communications. So it's not just the technology now, it's the way that innovation is portrayed within a business, and then the way it's communicated, working down. And I come back to Odedo, which was originally a podcasting platform, which was rendered useless by iTunes. And, they reinvented that, and that became Twitter. So again, if you have the flexibility at the board level, all this great tech, Rizwan, can be brought in, and new ideas and new business ideas generated from them.
I totally agree. I think the most important thing you just mentioned at the end of your conversation was the flexibility at the board level. I think it's fundamental at the management, at the leadership level, to have actually the flexibility within the vision to change and adapt and see that long path where you see that growth and something special happening. So yeah. I'll move to my second question. How do we learn about innovation and evaluate against existing business drivers?
Okay, then. So let me give everybody an example. This is almost a learning curve that I pulled from a slide deck we did for an organization about 6 months ago. So about a decade ago, and it's a technical slide, Rizwan, as opposed to a business slide, but a decade ago, companies used lease line services, usually back to their own data centers and onward to the internet. And, data centers were linked by VPNs, and they used traditional WAN services like MPLS. And one of the themes that Another Peak is heavily involved with is remote working. And it has its origins in one of our favorite startups that we brought to market in Europe called VelaCloud, which is now part of VMware. So 7 years ago, someone had the bright idea to design a box that sat between the office LAN and the wide area network and merged the real-time status of your combined WAN services with application priority. Okay, so whilst SD-WAN helped businesses get more out of the WAN providers, its primary gift was visibility. Okay, and you see in this, there's a flow here. So not only could you get a view of the SLAs from your broadband provider, which was fantastic, that had never happened before, but also what you could understand what applications were eating up your bandwidth. So after all, it's the applications that drive the businesses. So making sure that, those key applications of priority over things like Twitter and Facebook made perfect sense. And it also gave the smart partners, the resellers, what I call, smart resellers, it gave them stickiness, because all of a sudden they were working closer with their customers to manage SD-WAN, as the business requirements alter. So, you introduce a new application, I need to prioritize that new application. So you're starting to now see this curl. We've gone from internet, we've gone to SD-WAN. And then suddenly the SaaS services emerged. So you talked about the cloud. What SD-WAN allowed you to do was access these SaaS services at a click of a button, removing the need to transit through corporate data centers. And the concept of agility gained momentum, with individual departments selecting their own SaaS services without complex internal qualification and deployment. And never more true now with COVID and the number of individuals that are actually working from home. So as more services migrate to the cloud, then you start to see, as we go around another curve here, we start to see, secure access service edge, or SACE as people commonly call it. This is a common security policy. So you're pushing so much into the cloud, but you've got to manage the security around that. So that was great. And what we've seen very, very recently is now that there are a couple of sectors that were forgotten in all this SD-WAN. And the first one you and I have talked about many times is home workers. And COVID has amplified that, that traditional SD-WAN is expensive overkill. And if you then say, okay, think about LAN attached third-party users. So you go to work on a contract at a bank, the only way to get onto their LAN is via very complex, corralled and restrictive VPNs. So again, we've moved on from the SD-WAN plus now. So we're talking about cloud orchestrated overlays, secure tunnels between specific services, say desktop as a service, unified comms. We're talking about 200-300 euro endpoints running container-based operating systems, and removing the complexity, the security complexity, of remotely accessing all these services, that the remote workers need to be successful. And then the final bit that's coming right down into this extensible edge at the end is, what about all those machines that sit on a company LAN? Rizwan, it might be a robotic welding machine, it might be a baggage handling device, but all of these need software updates. They need to be maintained, they need triage. And just to complicate it even more, they talk some weird protocols, so you're into Modbus, OPC, you're into Zigbee. And all of this surrounds this whole concept of IoT, because with IoT, there are more devices, they're more connected to the internet. So to be able now to get a very cheap, inexpensive unit and download a specific protocol engine to that particular edge device and craft a secure overlay, say from the welder across the corporate LAN to the manufacturer's operational center at one click, is an amazing step forward. And this is where when we talked about how do we learn about innovations, a lot of it is iterative, Rizwan, that, you know, someone does something, sees a problem, solves another, and it's step by step. So things are evolving.
Okay. Before we go to the next slide and the next question, if you can reverse a bit, can you a little bit explain around more, you know, when we were talking about Another Peaks, the theater of themes concept, you know,
Yeah.
the architectures, the designer aura around it. So, you know, we are talking about really high-tech stuff, you know, hardcore engineering. So I believe when we technology is also like painting and designing, and then that design and form factor comes into play when we're talking about solutions like edge computing and IoT networks. So explain a bit around that, and then I will go to my next question that, you know, what you just said in your slide. So how does it relate to offering new business opportunities and potentially take the business in different direction?
Okay. Okay. Let me share the slides again. And okay. Okay. So I want in order to answer that, I'd wanted just to step through one of the latest buzzword areas, edge computing, Rizwan. Everybody's talking about edge computing, and, you know, especially with the COVID piece. Okay, so if you look at, say, a retail center faced with COVID restrictions, they want to do more with their install base. Things like CCTV, building management systems, the elevators, the security systems. So we came up with a set of themes. You talk about themes. What we did was we wouldn't look at an individual, say, image capture. We created themes which were around the Touchless Society. So how do I avoid touching things? How does information get presented to individuals in a simple, effective, but contactless way? So that was one of the ways we were working. So if you look at what we've got here and think of that, that retail example, the edge is gaining importance because the statistics are saying that by 2025, 75% of all enterprise data will be dealt with at the edge. So you could be, you know, very blasé and say, well, why is everybody going to the cloud if 75% of all the processing is going to be at the edge, according to the various analysts? So if you look at this particular slide, we did it account around safety, safer roads, logistics, you know, efficient facilities, and protecting individual workers. So we could move all of this data back to the cloud using some of the technology I think I've already described earlier on. Yeah. But the first thing to think about is the volume of data. You know, trillions of devices with a huge range of speeds and feeds from those devices. The internet stack that we love and use today was never designed to cope with that volume of frequency. Never mind the prospect of transferring it all the way back to remote cloud. So there are inherent barriers within the current internet infrastructure. So for IoT, when we looked at this in our Touchless Society, the first thing you discovered is that the public cloud offers at best a batch processing service for IoT, okay, which in fact isn't acceptable. So we have a volume issue, but we also have a frequency issue, because if sensors, you know, are detecting the state of the lift, those sensors need to be checked every second, not every minute. And therefore, again, you run up with certain conformance issues with the cloud. Then what we found is the real time. Okay, so if the information has a real-time response element, then you've compounded the issues by round trip times from the device to the public cloud and back again. So take augmented reality or virtual reality. Why are so many of those systems actually operating on site? And the answer is because the delay caused by transmitting the information back to the cloud to then process it, to then render it and send it back would effectively trigger motion sickness. So another concern is latency. And then finally, think of compliance. If I want to check that everybody is wearing a mask or social distancing, this involves image capture. I might want facial recognition, say in a Touchless Society model, to trigger access to buildings. But I don't want that information transferred across the cloud. What you need is an edge, and this is where the buzz is coming. And what are we talking about? Well, it's middleware sitting on top of a suitable compute engine to ingest events, to abstract against specific rules and trigger actions, but do it locally in real time, and then dropping and trashing the information. So the only thing that goes from the edge to the cloud is an aggregated, abstracted report that the cloud can then use to do its analytics. So the more you, to be fair, the more you analyze, obviously, the more potential benefits you get, but you're starting to see a hybrid model, Rizwan. So it's not edge versus cloud, it's hybrid. We've done a lot of work.
It's a mix of cloud and edge.
Yeah, cloud and edge, the two together, because the cloud is perfectly set up to store information and do the analytics, where the edge has the benefit of real-time latency and compliance.
So technically and basically, they complement each other.
They complement each other. I mean, we've done a lot of work as a group with Clearblade, for example, and that's edge-based middleware, but they have their cloud orchestration platform, and so you've got views that can be local views or estate-wide views. So the two work together.
So this means the edge is evolving. It's starting to take off, the machines, devices, right?
Correct. I mean, if you think of just all the devices that were in a business, and I put this slide up because it's one of it asks some really pertinent. Again, we're back to business questions, Rizwan, but the two are into work now. It's not all just about technology. So we sat with a company and 5 questions, okay, and simple ones. So where are my assets and where have they been? Okay. So one of the areas that we were looking at was the airports, and if you think of it from a business standpoint, you are into health and safety. You're into a lot of other issues other than just the technology. So if one of the examples we were using was things like portable generators, that an airport would have a portable generator, or luggage carts. And you can start to ask these key questions, and you were very surprised at the lack of information that was coming back. What we can do now with edge computing is, we can show the audience the individual devices being tracked, the data that they produce, how edge computing aggregates all this data together, say with existing CCTV feeds. So it isn't a siloed affair anymore. It could be, who's using the generator and why. You can show them the visualization. It might be of the airport or just a specific area, and you can geofence that area. what's your policy on the brake maintenance on the carts? An example from the IoT Slam event last week was somebody saying about wind turbines, and the manufacturer had given them a certain time period by which these particular parts would wear out, but because they were doing detailed analysis, they found that the parts were on average lasting another 6 months. Now, if you scale that up into budgeting, how much money do I spend? If I've suddenly got another 6 months on a piece of equipment that might cost a couple of £1 million or a couple of $1 million, then that impacts, board level decisions, Rizwan. So again, it's a combination of the two. And the other thing we were finding was, well, have you got enough or too many assets? Because if nobody's using the generators or the carts aren't being moved, then perhaps you've got too many of them.
Yeah, you get the benefit of inventory controls.
Correct. So yeah, again, very high level questions, but what we're finding is a combination of edge computing with cloud analytics is starting to provide some interesting information. You asked me about one of the themes, and I put this one up. It's the Touchless Society, and we were working with people in a railway environment and trying to determine what information we could bring in to create a true business view of what was happening. So, you were talking earlier on about the individual themes. So just think about what I can do here. I can map individual spaces on a TV image, or CCTV image, sorry. Right. So I can take a feed from a normal camera, and I can say, okay, how many people pass this space in the last 5 minutes, or how many people are in this space at any one time for social distancing, or are people going to elevators, or when the elevators are broken? It's this kind of thing, Rizwan. And we're finding that we can put this with AI technology as well. So, your first benefit is I can improve the security, the safety, and the compliance. Okay. Yes, it's important in a COVID environment, but that can extend, to real analytical information about where people are moving, how people are flowing. We looked at
the amount of data and analytics, one will get is another area.
Exactly. We looked at, so there was an example of an airline company that supplies the airlines, and they were asked to improve the user experience for disabled passengers. And they created a complete touchless self-service kiosks. Okay, that was all based on hand movements. Now, it transpires that that's absolutely perfect for a touchless society in a COVID era. So what are you doing there? You're using video assistance, voice and image recognition. They folded in basic health screening. So for the business, that's increased customer experience. The customer is now able to interact with this thing and learn about how to get to a certain gate, or if it's pushed into a retail environment, which shops to go to.
I think when we talk about customer experience or user experience, and then to provide quality services, the most fundamental part to do that is more information, more data, and more analytics.
Correct.
The more information you have about the environment and that particular set of location and the services, and you're able to gather that information, then you're able to provide, enhanced experience.
Yes. Yeah. I think one thing we've learned is, conversations just today on things like loyalty programs. a traditional loyalty program involves an ecosystem of partners that all have their own CRM, ERM systems, very complex to integrate it. So there's new emerging technology that completely simplifies that, makes the act of linking all this together incredibly simple. And if you can map that to customer behavior, okay, so if I can say that, I know Rizwan's traveling to Cape Town, therefore in my loyalty app, I'll give him 30% off a Hilton hotel, say, or a Best Western hotel, because I know he might need one. Or I give him an extra bonus off a restaurant. I know where he is. It's that whole piece about mapping the customer behavior and then reflecting it back. So in this case, we can improve, retail purchases.
So basically, CRM and loyalty programs, and again, all of these CRM systems. So they sort of merge or sort of come into play with the edge computing. How does the security work?
Well,
how does the interoperability?
Well, what you now find is that I guess the start point is, in order to analyze, you've got to have the data. Okay, so
data.
It's data again. So what you can do now is, from the cloud, you could set a series of policies that are pushed down to the edge. So let's say, again, I'll just switch back to this screen share here. In this particular example, let's say I want to work out the particular flow of individuals from one retail unit to the exit, say. You set a series of policies. The edge compute device is taking in perhaps a camera feed. It might be taking in flow monitoring information from other sources. So the information will come to the edge. The policy that you set in the cloud is acted on the edge. So an example would be, say, your lifts break down. So the edge detects that there's a problem with the lift. Now, in a COVID environment, what do you want to do? Well, you want to notify your security staff because you don't want lots of people queuing at the lift. 2, you want to update your digital signage to get people to go via other exits or go up the stairs. So what you end up with is a policy that is taking information in from the elevator, from flow management, from your CCTV, is making a local decision and is triggering the alerts to the digital signage, to the security staff, because typically they'll have handheld devices now that will update them on crisis management. And all that is dealt with at the edge. What comes back to the cloud would be a report, would be, the statistics would be information that an alert has triggered. So the compliance piece, the security piece, is dealt with at the edge, and the analytics are done in the cloud.
Okay, so that also means that within that policy in the edge, the AI is in play as well.
Yes, yeah. And so what we're finding is AI, traditionally you would think, supercomputers, and AI has advanced in leaps and bounds. In terms of the use of compute and how focused they are. So what we're now seeing is, you as an individual, say you run the station, Rizwan, you can say, okay, I want to from the cloud, orchestrate a series of AI engines to be on these compute. And the compute has to be able to handle it, otherwise it's not going to work. But you can dynamically push these in. So it might be that you push one AI engine down to do a certain task. Then once it's done the task, you orchestrate that off and put another AI engine down to do another task with another feed. And we're starting to see that emerging as well. And again, the benefits are huge because the people who are implementing these are getting so much data back in terms of analytics, in terms of how their business should operate, is operating, etc.
And that happens seamlessly, without any interruption and
Yes.
downtime.
Yes, exactly. And the whole
Wow.
the whole piece is automated. You would have, a set of profiles that can be based on timers as well, Rizwan.
Okay, so while you move to the next slide, a bit of pre-question around that. While you explain, I want to know what actually is another peak.
Yeah.
In business terms, what you guys do.
Yeah.
And what kind of services.
Okay. All right.
And later, I also want you to talk a bit about specifically, on the edge computing side with regards to Clearblade.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I think to set the scene on this one, 12 years ago, an organization called Another Trail was founded, and the group that founded it have, like myself, a background in startups, and we were there to represent individual vendors, individual startups within the European theatre. So Rizwan has a good idea. In a certain technology field, we would take this and over 12 years built up a huge ecosystem of end users and partners that use us, that trust us in terms of innovation. So this was kind of the foundations, and Another Trail is still very, very active with various startups around the world. But Another Peak feeds from that discovery of Another Trail, okay? And we go after specific sectors. So we do a lot of work at the moment in a consultancy firm in the airports, in transportation, in retail, and some work with the telcos as well. But this is about architecting business solutions. So it's almost like an iterative process of understanding what the business needs, and then providing a solution set based on what they've already got. It might include some open source, and it might include some of the stuff we've learned from Another Trail. So what we'll talk about is listen, assess, and assist. So, describe your existing services and where you want to get to. We come in, think of us like a portable innovations lab. Okay, so we're coming in with some great new ideas around your specific business goals, and then we can architect that particular design. So we can say, look, you could do this, this, and this. And we've developed an architects group now who specialize in taking new innovative tech and merging it, integrating it into existing deployments, and do it. As I said before, this has to be a continuous improvement. It's an evolution, Rizwan, because what you can't do is do some innovation, deploy it, and walk away, because your competitors will have then beaten you in the delay. It's constantly listening, assessing, and assisting these clients, because the software is changing overnight, the hardware is changing overnight as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The moment actually you stop, your competition has beaten you.
Correct. So think of us as a bridge, and I think to put this into, you talked earlier about the relationship with Clearblade. Clearblade is a classic example of an organization. Clearblade is an element. It's a very, very dynamic edge compute element. But if you look at the conversations that we have with as Another Peak, that includes talking to sensors. So we were talking to NimbleLink the other day about the next generation of sensors. and the sensors automatically feed into the ClearBlade stack. So suddenly you've got something called situation awareness, that the ClearBlade solution will know that your sensor is active before it's actually been deployed in your train. And we were talking to a eSIM manufacturer. So, you know, if your requirement is that these sensors are on mobile devices, if they're moving or if they're going from country to country, then having a, you know, one SIM deal, how do you get the information back? So again, this is about SIM profiles. So you have a profile, you drop the profile automatically down to the SIM. It reacts depending on which country you're in. Yeah, okay. And you get a certain tariff and the visibility. But all of this it enables the business through ClearBlade via the sensor and the SIM to see that this particular truck or this container is in a certain place for 3 hours when it should have been there for 20 minutes. So is there something wrong with that? And it's building those solutions around it. Yeah, ClearBlade have just done a deal with Google. So for the analytics side, so that's the other end of the equation. So, you know, we can put a ClearBlade solution in a private cloud. It's already hosted in Google Cloud, but now you've got the Google Analytics package to sit behind it to do fancy things with the aggregated information that ClearBlade has pushed back. And yeah, there's some really innovative tech coming out of this whole edge area.
So if I put it in my words, another peak is also sort of a nursery or a school of innovation and business for tech startups.
It is. Think of another trail as the nursery, another peak as the glue that would glue that together with all the other things that the businesses has.
And like put them in the practical world.
Put them in the practical world, exactly. And as I say, it's, you know, we've done a lot of work at another peak on APIs. So there's another example. The work, we have something called the API restaurant, and it's a lovely concept. But you know, in order for different systems to communicate now, that one of the common ways is via API calls. So how do new innovations, how does the data that they produce, and everything we've talked about the edge is about producing data, a lot of it via API calls, how do you bring that in? And how do you craft a solution for a business so they can get the best advantage?
Okay. So before we wrap up our session, I want to ask two small questions for the audience in terms of, you know, if you need to explain something very high tech in a one-on-one language. So for example, a use case scenario, let's say we have a logistics company in South Africa, mm-hmm. and they have a lot of systems in place. They have their trucks, their delivery systems. They have their customers and other services, and there's huge and a lot of data being used and transported and whatnot. So, for example, if the IT side needs to efficiently roll out, process, and implement all of this information, data, mm-hmm. Operations and services, and then, for example, they have XYZ brand of IT services within their location. Mm-hmm. So, if another peak would like to offer them a robust and more advanced edge computing solution, let's say from ClearBlade, mm-hmm. which will improve their operational efficiency, mm-hmm. data security, and processing in relation to the cloud. So how would you present it business and commercial words in let's say 101?
Well, I would say that if you look at the primary drivers, they are efficiency. How would I present this? It's how can I make you more efficient and more secure with what you've got? Okay, and then that efficiency comes out of the visibility. I can see where everything is, and the ability, once you see where things are, once you start to look at the fact that that truck, has been stationary for 20 minutes and it shouldn't be, or where it drove around Johannesburg, that's when you start to see the real benefits. That's when people start to look and go, okay, well, what we are proposing from another peak is that visibility, is that statewide visibility, and then you can start to take in other feeds. Which are the drivers? What are they carrying? Because other factors come in that you would have never seen if you simply had that single siloed approach.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I think there are some very more immersive areas I would like to talk to you about, but definitely in the next sessions.
Excellent.
We don't want to bore our audience with the longer movie-size sessions. So, it was really a pleasure and honor to have you on the show. It was very precise, to the point. I would like to talk more on the edge, but I think let's do in the next session.
Okay.
We go more deeper into some proper use cases, hardcore edge computing solutions. So to Chris and to everyone else who's listening, I'm Reid here, signing off from Bond Space Station for another peak. Chris, any words before you sign off?
No, it's just been a pleasure once again to talk to you, Rizwan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Have a lovely evening.
Cheers.
See you soon.